Yo, what does welcome back to Reviews with Jake, where I just got done watching Black Widow. Black Widow is the latest MCU film, which is set several MCU films ago, in which we have Natasha Romanoff, aka Black Widow, on the run after the events of Civil War. She then decides to multitask a little bit while being on the run and teams up with a few people from her past to stop the uprising threat of more Black Widows. This is a very highly anticipated, long-awaited film for several reasons, not only because it's the first MCU film to be released since the pandemic, but it's also technically the first film of Phase 4. Yes, I know the Disney Plus shows have also been a part of Phase 4, and they've been fine. Of course I've been watching them. I thought about reviewing them at one point, but I decided to stick to my guns and just not review shows. But MCU films just hit differently. Every time I see the logo, the animation, that theme song while I'm seated in the seat in a movie theater, I get filled with kiddish excitement every single time. But seeing that same animation, hearing the same song while seated at home for a Disney Plus show, it just does not fulfill me in the same way, which is exactly why I was not going to see this movie with Premiere Access. But yes, loads of expectation from everyone about this film, and that alone is enough for crippling expectations. But then it's also the first and I assume only Black Widow solo film we're ever going to get, which I think I can safely and confidently say that the world has been waiting for quite some time. I mean, it is quite absurd when you think about how long it took for this movie to happen. I mean, if you think about it, she was the third Avenger to be introduced. You got Iron Man, Hulk, Black Widow. Unless you're counting Nick Fury, which would technically make her fourth, but I'm not. But better late than never, perhaps? Well, let's see. The pros start with some excellent performances, particularly from our four main protagonists. Scarlett Johansson does her thing as Natasha Romanoff, Black Widow, as she always does. I mean, I don't think she ever really blows me away in this role as this character, but she's a solid base level. You can always rely on her. I mean, it's probably because she is a very stoic, straight-to-business character, so it's not like this character ever demands for her to show like a true range of emotion or anything, but you know, she does the damn thing and she plays it well. Perhaps that's exactly why David Harbour and Florence Pugh were the standouts for me in this film, because they were given two characters that they could do some very fun, interesting things with. David Harbour as Red Guardian was a lot of fun, carrying some solid laughs with some solid, charismatic self-absorption. And Florence Pugh had equal parts laughter with the cherry on top of most of the film's emotional weight, and I thought she carried both very well. These strong performances helped the film's pacing substantially. I mean, this is a 2-hour and 15-minute film, which is pretty long. If you ask me, anything over 2 hours, when you can start to have the conversation of whether or not the film is too long or if it feels too long. But that's not the case in this film. You're engaged throughout the whole thing. You're either entertained by the awesome, huge, epic action sequences, or you're entertained by some great actors playing interesting characters. Having some grand-scaled, huge, epic action sequences will always help this as well. I mean, when you think of the MCU, it is pretty low-key. It's low stakes. There's nothing galactic here. There's no universes at stake. It's pretty local, but still packs one hell of a punch. During the pandemic, we just didn't get a lot of stuff to this scale. Explosions, car crashes, airplane crashes, all that good stuff. And to start to see movies like this starting to come out again and see them on the big screen, it's just delightful. It's nice to see just millions and millions and millions of dollars all over the screen in a nice, grand, face-fisted fashion. However, that being said, the action sequences in the film were not perfect, and that does lead me right to the cons. For starters, there were several sequences, particularly in hand-to-hand combat, that were completely overproduced. Rapid editing, where you got a fist being thrown that's captured from 5 different angles, and they feel the need to show all 5. I'm a broken record at this point, so I'm not going to dive into specifics again, but if I see this kind of action in a movie, generally speaking, I dock it. The other frustrating factor is them seemingly constantly forgetting that Natasha Romanoff is a human being, not a superhuman. She gets tossed around like a freaking rag doll. At one point, she gets thrown out of a multiple-story window, hits a bunch of vents and along the way like freaking pinball, smashes to the ground, and just hops back up. I did not see Fast 9 for the same reason I don't watch any of those movies anymore, but from what I'm hearing, that film suffered from a similar syndrome. The physics, the logic, the gravity, I mean, it just pushes things one step too far, and having one line, one joke in there about needing an aspirin after a fight sequence, it's just not enough to justify that. Yes, I realize I'm asking a film set in the MCU to be grounded in reality. I realize that. I realize the MCU is starting to do multiverses and traverse time and whatnot. But if you have a character that is a human being standing and fighting next to gods and whatnot, at least make the person feel like a damn human. Show them have limitations, take damage, get hurt, struggle a little bit. I mean, this is essentially a spy espionage movie. There's no aliens and super beings in this and whatnot, so make it feel grounded like one. On the note of the espionage, I also didn't really like the opening title sequence. The graphics, the font, the music, the overall presentation, it just felt really out of left field. I mean, it started off feeling in place after the opening sequence. The two of them felt like they were in line, but then after that, it just goes to MCU lighthearted mode. Also, on the note of comparing it to the other MCU films, I really did not care for this plot. Not so much in the story and the plot in itself, but more so the timing. Like, I think it would have held its own if we would have seen this movie after Civil War when it is set. But as a result of this film being set before several MCU entries that we have already seen, including Infinity War and Endgame, which one of them, spoiler alert, kills the title character of this film, it just makes this film feel super inconsequential. Like, we know that Natasha Romanoff is going to survive this film so that she can die in Endgame. But we also know that nothing truly impactful within the MCU is going to happen, because otherwise the ramifications of the event of this film would have been felt in the films that we've already seen. As a result, we, the audience, know that this film needs to operate within a box. It needs to start a certain way and it needs to end a certain way. It needs to work somewhere in this margin. Had they released this film after Civil War, in which it is set, perhaps we, the audience, would not be ahead of them. We would not have these expectations going in. They'd have the freedom, the element of surprise. Even if they gave us the same damn film exactly, at least we, the audience, would not feel like we're ahead of the curve. Sure, this is not the first time the MCU has made a film out of order, but generally speaking, they always have a good practical reason to do a film out of order when they do that. For instance, Ant-Man and the Wasp technically takes place before Infinity War, but if we had seen Ant-Man and the Wasp before Infinity War, our introduction to the snap, the dusting, would have been in Ant-Man and the Wasp when Scott Lang is in the quantum realm. And how anticlimactic would that have been to see it there for the first time versus what we saw in Infinity War, where we see half of our characters all disappear. It's all about the impact, the storytelling. That's why Quentin Tarantino flips all of his movies to all hell. But for me, I can't think of a single reason where we benefited from seeing this movie now versus when it was set. This whole film just feels like a DLC to a video game, something Marvel just cobbled together for extra content because we were barking for it. I could not shake that feeling while watching this movie that it felt very forced and actually shockingly aimless. I think the biggest reason for that is the lack of a real antagonist threat. Yes, we get Taskmaster throughout most of the film, who is great when present, but ultimately is just really muscle for the real big bad, who we never really meet except for the very beginning and the very end of the film. So you don't really get the battle, the back and forth, the hero versus the villain. It's more so Black Widow and company fighting a bunch of faceless goons that are sent by some guy that we barely know. A dude that probably has the stupidest plot armor that I've ever seen in the MCU, possibly beyond, but that's a conversation for another day. All in all, this movie is okay. It's perfectly watchable, and you'll probably enjoy yourself to at least some degree throughout the whole course of the film. But timing is everything, and the timing made this film feel like a side quest. Quite possibly the first time that I personally felt like the MCU just threw us a bone so we had something to chew on and shut up while they had guests in the parlor. I'm going to give Black Widow a C. But that's just me. What do you guys think? Let me know if you agree or disagree in the comments below. And make sure to subscribe to this channel to stay up to date with new reviews coming real soon. Stay safe, thanks for checking in.